Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getItinwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
My guest is Denny Tedesco. He is a producer, best known for both the Wrecking Crew and Immediate Family documentaries.
Yeah.
I'd like to delve into your background a little bit more. Obviously, everybody pretty much knows your dad was Tommy Tedesco,
Right.
well-known session musician, and you went off in a different direction and decided to work in what at that point was film,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, different direction. It means that it assumes
Different artistic
Well,
direction.
it seems I had a direction towards music. I had no direction towards music. I can't play an instrument, so that was, I guess, an easier direction to not take.
Did you? I mean, you tried to play an
Oh
instrument.
yeah,
I think,
look,
right?
these.
Yeah,
Are
I mean,
great.
I was going to say.
Anybody
yeah.
sees that, it looks like I play an instrument. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right.
No.
Uh-huh.
No, I didn't practice. It's just simple. You gotta practice.
You didn't have the passion.
I didn't have the passion. You know, I don't know if years later I realized I was ADHD, diagnosed.
Yeah.
And
Most of us are.
yeah, and I didn't realize, there were things I don't have patience. I just can't stay focused.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I refer to myself as a lead actor in short attention span theater.
Yeah, that's very good.
It's like, and one of the things that I think a lot of creative people have that sort of gene.
Well, it's weird that they can do someone that does have or on the spectrum can nail it
and can
they're
totally
focused.
focus.
They're
Right,
focused. They're
right.
geniuses.
Yeah, yeah. But then it's that one thing. It's like what's that phrase? Idiot savant.
Yeah, I'm just the idiot without the savant.
But you obviously focused on something.
Yeah, well, you know what it was? Growing up, I'm very lucky. We grew up in Los Angeles, in Northridge. Dad went to work every day, didn't realize, and we were talking about this earlier, maybe if my dad played music at home, maybe if he played his guitar at home, maybe there would have been something there. Mm-hmm. But I never saw that. As my older brother, who's 10 years older than me, Dale, he played in bands he was 16 playing in bands, piano. But I never saw my father play until the 70s because he was at work all the time.
It was a job, basically.
It was a job, and he didn't have to practice.
Right.
He had already done that 10 years before where he was playing 8-10 hours a day practicing. Mm-hmm. And then that just kind of went the other way where work was 8-10-12 hours. So that kind of took up kept his chops up.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying before, when I worked in the studio as an engineer, after an 18-hour day of music, you don't want to hear anything except maybe talk radio on the way home.
Yeah, and it was for him, it was gambling, baseball games or movies or whatever. I mean,
typical of that generation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. Yeah, so we never did that.
Now when you went into film,
yeah.
I know you started out, actually there was some mention that you had worked as a set designer on one of my favorite cult films, Eating Raoul.
Yeah. I was not designer. That'd be another leap. I was I was still in college at Loyola Marymount, and we were doing a student film. And there was an older gentleman there, Bob Schulenberg, who was an art director. He was helping out. I don't know how he got involved, but he was the designer, and he was at least 20 years older than me, 25. He was my parents' age, mom's age. And he was friends with Paul Bartel, and he started talking. He says, I think you'd be great on this film that we're doing. I was like, okay. I didn't know what I was doing.
You're basically schlepping stuff around and being a gopher? Or what were you doing?
No, not at all. I was...
I mean, what kind of background did it give you, is what I'm...
Nothing. I had no background. I was just a grip on this one student film. And he said, I think you'd be a great decorator. I was like, oh, okay. Whatever. And I called a friend up, what's the decorator do? What's the dresser do? But it was so low budget. It was like, I remember going in for the interview with the producer, who basically, I kind of bullshit my way through that. I dressed a set. I helped dress a set, move shit around.
Yeah.
And then, and she goes, well, I'm not sure if it's going to be 200 or 250. And then I got the job. And she goes, "How we had money?" I said, "Can we do $250 a week?" She said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my God!" I
Over the
nailed it.
moon, right?
Over the moon. There was no hour wage. There was nothing. We just did everything.
Yeah.
And it was only a 3-man art department, so it was just Bob, myself, and Loma Lee was, and she protected me.
I remember that set being, I mean, generally that was pretty minimalist in that
Well,
sense.
that set, thank God, was Art Fine. Art Fine had an apartment. Art Fine, do you remember Art? He's a writer.
Yeah,
He was also the manager of the Blasters.
Yes.
Art was a hip, like a, oh God, a rockabilly guy. So all that shit that was in his apartment worked perfectly. I didn't have to do anything. So it looked like I was a genius.
It's great.
And, there was a small crew. And they were very nice people. So that was my break into the business. But I wanted to write. I wanted to
really?
write scripts.
Oh,
But,
interesting.
writing scripts, you have to do the same thing like you do as a musician.
Yeah.
You have to write.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And
could
your
talk
heart
about
wasn't
it.
in writing either?
It was when I got going, but once I got, every time I got stopped meeting like writer's block, I got sidetracked.
It's hard to stay in the zone with writing. I mean, I do a lot of writing too, but you've got to be in this certain state of mind, and then you can really crank. But
yeah, once you get going, it was fun. And so I wrote a few scripts, but again, wasn't serious enough. And then I just took every job after that through college and after college, and then started doing. When I got out of college, I was doing lighting. I was at art department for a while, and then got out of art department when I realized if I wanted to write, I was on a set. It was with Mark Romanek, who was a director. He had his first film in Arizona, and I think I'm making $100 a day, and the fourth grip is making $100 a day, and I had the responsibility of an art department. So I started thinking, it's like, I got to make more money because I have no time to write. But that was, again, not the reason why I wasn't writing. I probably went way too far. But I just jumped into film, into gripping and lighting, and gripping and electrical, and started doing MTV was around at that point. We were doing a lot of videos. So that opened up a lot of doors for new people like us. It was non-union. So we would do anything. Again,
and anywhere basically.
Anywhere, no rules. I mean,
going to shoot at this warehouse, whatever.
Yeah,
right?
and there was no rules. I mean, so you kind of like watched people experience. Some great DPs came out of that. Directors came out of that world.
Now, how'd you get from there to IMAX?
Someone just recommended me as a grip,
Really?
and I thought, "There's no way I'm getting that job," because I wasn't like, it was, hey, do you want to go to Japan for 3 weeks? They're looking for a grip. I thought, okay, that's cool. But I'm thinking, I'm not going to get that. And then I realized when I got it, they've never had a grip on their set. So they couldn't judge too much.
Cool.
So I was in good shape. So it was, my first job was, it was called, oh God, the volcano film.
Kilimanjaro?
No. It was the guy that did Mount St. Helens. He did a thing on Mount St. Helens, Ring of Fire.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So we went to Japan, went to a few other places, and that was my first thing. And then I went into, and it was fun because with those days, there's only 3 or 4 of you on a crew. So what I liked about it is you're 25%, 33% of the crew. You have an opinion. Versus when I was working in town, I'm the 55th person on a call sheet.
Right, just shut up and stand in the corner and do your job.
Put the sandbag there, put
Yeah.
some of it can be creative, but it was like nothing. So it was nice to be able to be part of something that was, from the beginning to the end.
Big learning experience too
Very
at that
much
point,
so.
right?
And
Because
then-
you take on a lot more responsibility.
A lot more, and you had more not just, lighting or, that wasn't much lighting. It was more setting up, and then I was into, then we went to Africa, and then I'm basically, helping the AC. I'm loading camera for him, or loading the mags, and dolly, whatever we had. And then organizing, production, getting everything ready to go to Africa or Japan or China, wherever we were going.
So you
So that kind of
obviously
started
also have a
production.
history here of kind of learning as you go.
My biggest problem, seriously, is
I don't think it's a problem at all, because
No,
for me, I think it's an asset.
I know, but when I say I feel if I missed anything is having a mentor. And
Yeah, okay.
my father
Okay.
was my mentor, but he wasn't in the film business.
Right.
He was just
Right.
more of a person that common sense, or would, what would he do? What would Dad think about this? This is after he left, obviously, but when I say I learned as I went, I feel like I didn't learn everything correctly or in the right manner.
Oh,
and I struggle, and I
get
still
that.
struggle with certain things.
Well, I mean, it's funny. I learned to do video the same way. I just kind of started doing it for clients, and
Right.
I did that. And then I always felt the same way that I'm kind of stumbling around in the dark and figuring it out.
Yeah.
And then I interviewed this one guy, and he had been a videographer for National Geographic
Right.
for years and years, and he had like traveled all over the world and done these interviews with people. And he started explaining something to me about the way he cut his interviews, because he did multicam interviews and stuff. He starts explaining it to me, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, oh crap, I've been doing it right.
Yeah.
Because you really don't know if you figure it out in a vacuum like that. You really never know what you're missing.
I agree with you. I mean, where I run into the problem, go back to the ADHD, was when you're talking about video. When I started my film, we'll talk about that later, in '96 or whatever, and I couldn't edit. I didn't have an Avid. That was the only thing you could edit on.
Right.
Avid.
Right.
Avid.
And you were doing film at that point too when you started it, right?
But there was an Avid at the office. But I didn't know how to use that technology.
It was pretty damn complex back then too.
And if I took a course, well, that's a course, 3-day course. What am I going to do? I don't know. You go in there, and then I was lost. So I'm saying it's very intimidating.
It is, and Avid's program is one of the most intimidating as far as because it's made by video people. It's complex.
Yeah,
I think.
So the technology scared me for a long time.
Yeah,
So.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me the only reason I was able to deal with it was because I had already come from the space of nonlinear editing in audio.
Yeah.
And so I could.
You
I could
understood that concept.
Yeah.
I can't imagine when we started, when we were filming, I'd see, the editors in film, and you go and there's snippets of film in the containers.
Yeah.
That would have been the worst job for Denny. We would never get anything cut. I would have lost everything.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because I came up in the era of 2-inch tape.
Yeah.
And, especially I worked at Cherokee, and one of the owners of Cherokee was a guy named D. Rob, and he was an absolute genius at splicing stuff, between syllables and words. He could pull that off.
No one understand.
That's so hard,
people do
man.
understand, but I remember seeing tape cut and going, that's the master you're cutting.
Right, exactly. Same thing with the 2-inch,
Yeah.
It's like, yikes, you screw that up and it's all over.
Yeah.
But some of these people are really, really expert at that. Now, for me, I welcome the digital stuff because, man, there's an undo key.
Yeah.
Going back to your IMAX stuff,
Yeah.
did you learn a lot about cinematography? Because it seems like, especially with your... Because what I want to talk about, I want to talk about the evolution, your evolution.
It's interesting.
As your evolution from Wrecking Crew to Immediate Family. Now, obviously, one took years and years, and the other was much more immediate. Sorry.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of things that I notice.
Sorry, I hit this.
That's
Still
okay.
there? Okay.
Yeah, all good. A couple of things that I noticed. Number one, the evolution of your cinematographic
look.
Your style, your visual style is evolved, and that's one thing.
Yeah, with Wrecking Crew, when I started shooting that, the round table was the key thing for us,
which is great
for me, and that was because I've said this so many times, but when I saw my father. He never saw him at work, so I never saw him with a guitar. And always saw him bantering, at card games or at the kitchen table or somewhere. It was always that musicians.
The New Yorkers called it sitting around kibitzing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And that goes back to Broadway Danny Rose, the movie with Woody Allen.
Oh, Woody Allen's movie, yeah.
And they'd sit around the table like this at the coffee shop. And I always remember that scene talking about Danny Rose, how they basically just jump on conversations, over each other.
Yeah.
And that's how I remembered growing up. And so that's how I wanted it. I wanted to be a voyeur. I love being a voyeur because I don't like it. I love interviewing and talking to people, but there's something about being a voyeur, someone that's listening in on a conversation. It feels real.
Yeah. And they forget you're there after a while.
Totally.
And they just, yeah, of course.
And so I had the first day, I mean, that was our first shoot day ever on the Wrecking Crew. I had two dollies with 216 cameras, just rounding, just circling this table. And, it worked. It worked out great. But I think don't forget, when I shot that, you had to make a decision. Are you shooting 16:9 or are you shooting 4:3?
Sure, yeah.
Which was TV.
Yeah.
And it was like a decision you had to make. I don't know why. I don't even remember why we had to make that, but we had to decide that. And we went by TV because in those days we didn't think we'd ever make it in film theaters, or most likely it played just on TV. And 19 years later, when I sold the film to Netflix, they considered all that footage vintage. By the time I got to it, it was all vintage.
But by then you also have the technology to change it.
Yeah, and some of it we changed, some of it we just left. And
and it works well.
Yeah,
But the other thing that I noticed is that your style, in terms of when you were interviewing people, that has evolved too. And I think that's
interesting. I hope so. Hope it got better.
Well,
I just enjoy talking.
Well, that's it. And I studied a lot of interviewers in terms of their style, and one of my favorites was always Dick Cavett.
Yeah.
And Dick Cavett tells this one story in his memoir about, he used to be a writer for Jack Parr before he got his own show.
Yeah.
And when he got his show, Jack Parr called him up. And he said to him, "Kid, I got one piece of advice for you. Don't do interviews. Have conversations."
Oh, wow.
And it's such, and I think that's, to me, I sense that, especially in the immediate family film, there's much more of that where you're conversational with people, and it's very, very natural. It feels.
That's interesting. Maybe it's out of lack of other things that make it go that way. I don't know.
But it seems like your style has evolved.
There's been times when, I can't remember the country group. So we'll get to it, but I had a job where I felt confident enough to start doing the Wrecking Crew as I was producing this other job. It was called Top 10 lists it was this horrible show on TV Land. Top 10 cars, movie cars, top 10.
Oh, geez.
It was top 10 TV moms, top 10 this, top 10 that. And I don't, you would just interview people, and the guy would give me a bunch of questions out of New York, and I would just interview people. But there was a job where I had to go to Universal, and the guy was always cheap, never want to spend any money. So we got down to, you got to go. Well, first of all, he goes, you got to go do, oh God, what's his name from Cheers, the postman?
I only remember the character's name was Cliff.
Ratzenberger.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he goes, you got to go to Westlake and interview him. Okay. So I go out there, and he sees me. We say hello. He goes, "Where's your crew?" I said, "You're looking at him. I'm interviewing, I'm lighting, I'm doing sound, I'm doing camera." But I was forced into it.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn as you went.
Yeah.
But I remember doing this with a country singer, a country group. There was 3 country folks in this band, the young kids at Universal. I had to go backstage, in the green room, which is a hole. Couldn't get back far enough to get all 3 in the shot. I had to be in the hall.
It's a closet. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was not prepared because I was given the job that day, and they said, "Here's the questions." Okay. And I can't remember what it was, but one of them said something. I started making conversation a term, it's that time of the day. And I go, "Yeah, I understand. I understand the time of the day," or something whatever it was.
Uh-huh.
And she goes, "No, that's the name of the album."
Oops.
You know, it was like, he's busted. I had no chance. I had obviously knew nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
you know, I did artist relations for a microphone company in Europe.
yeah.
For Shure microphones. And most of the time I knew the artists, but occasionally, you know, somebody would come through that I really didn't know. Maybe they were just regional in Europe or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, you can kind of try to go like, yeah, man, I really like your music.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because you couldn't like pull it up on Spotify at that
No.
point. You know, it's like just gotta kind of hope that it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hope he liked it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You know, but going back to your, let's go back to the Wrecking Crew for a minute,
Yeah.
because that was obviously, I mean, in certain ways, that was like inadvertently a life's work almost.
Yeah.
And you obviously went through a lot of different phases of that thing.
Yeah.
Now I saw back before you released it, I think I caught it in Nashville. I was there for a Summer NAMM show.
Oh, the Summer NAMM.
2011.
Yeah, I remember doing that.
Right, or 2010,
And
2011,
everybody
something
had
like that.
headphones on to hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
And
awful.
at that point, I remember thinking to myself, man, I feel for this dude trying to deal with all that publishing.
Yeah, the labels and the publishing. Mm-hmm. All right, so Dad's passing away in 95. No, 96, he gets diagnosed with cancer. So I thought, I'm going to, you know, I always wanted to tell that story about him and all his other friends, you know, in the 60s that did all that work. And so I went to my father and told him what I wanted to do. He says, okay, yeah, it's great. So he says, so I said, I want to put a round table together. And he goes, and I said, who do you suggest? He goes, well, put Hal, Carol, Plaz, and Earl Palmer at the round table. But
That's a hell of a combination right there.
yeah, it would have been. But Earl got sick, so he wasn't there. But the other four were there. So we did the round table. I was shooting film, and then realized, okay, I got to go after these other individuals for their storyline. Again, I didn't know what I was doing. I was still thinking about it. I didn't know how I was going. And then I waited too long for my father. I went and shoot my father, and it probably was about July or August, and he dies in November. But at that point, he had really decayed and really
Wasn't in shape.
Yeah, wasn't in shape. So that interview was never used, but what it taught me was don't wait. Don't wait. And also because I waited because I was shooting film. And with film, there was more of a process. Yeah, it was a little more expensive. Or even if I could get it, you got to get bigger crew.
Got to have a crew. Yeah, exactly.
You know, versus AC, they had to prep the camera, blah, 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 blah. And by the time I got it, it was too weak.
You missed out.
It missed out. And I thought later, I could have gone with a cassette player and gotten an interview, which would have been just as great, if not better.
Yeah.
And will be better than nothing. And I realized, and I I was in Spain for a festival, and I got to meet Albert Mazel, the wonderful, the Mazel brothers were these fabulous, you know, they were the big documentary makers, you know, rock and roll and stuff. And he was in his 80s, and we were at dinner, him, me, and our translator. Like, we didn't need a translator for him and I, but I got to say to him, I said, Albert, if you had one choice, film or video, what would you pick? And he says, I'll give you 24 reasons not to use film. And for those who don't understand the term, 24 frames is film, a second.
Okay.
But he's saying, take the video. And I know why, for me, because in my head, egotistically, I was shooting in film because I wanted to be a director. Do you know what I mean? I want the look. I want that, you know, cinema. You know, at this point, I'm 30 or whatever I was. And when he said that, it rang true, because all those times when you're doing an interview, like, you know, we could be starting an interview. I only got 11 minutes on a roll. So I would not, do anything that was going to be important up front. It would be just BS, just bullshit conversation, family, blah, 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 blah. And then I tap the cameraman's leg to start rolling. because I didn't want to waste
Sure.
the first 2-3 minutes of nothing so they get comfortable.
Right.
And then we go into it.
Right.
And you had to time it, because there's nothing worse at 11 minutes, a rollout. And sometimes what I would do is, even if we had a rollout, I'd tell the cameraman, or tell the soundman, just keep rolling, because I didn't want to miss something that was after we stopped rolling film. And it actually worked.
Because you could always use it with some B-roll over it or something.
And it worked.
Sure.
There was a couple of times there's things in there that were like, oh, I caught it. But it's really about the message. And that's what it is. It's about the message more than sometimes the look. And that was important to me. So.
Oh, I totally get that. And, it's funny. I don't know if you would be familiar with the Bahari Brothers.
No.
They had a label called Modern Music, I think, back in the 40s, 50s. And they had recorded all these old blues players.
Oh, wow.
And they had basically, what they had done was they put a tape machine in the back of a transit van or something, and driven around, and they would say, here's a bottle of wine, play me a song about your girlfriend. And they would get the publishing on all these old blues artists. And years later, there was basically some class action suits to get this money back.
Wow.
And I was helping out a friend of mine who was working in publishing at the time, and I went and interviewed some of these people to...
The old blues guys.
Yeah. I went up to Altadena and interviewed Johnny Otis.
Wow.
So...
They didn't have anything. Did they have the writing on it? Or?
They had nothing.
Wow.
And that's why they actually, what was interesting was the first person to challenge this and take up the court case was B.B. King, who did have good representation. And because of him, a lot of these other guys, Richard Berry, for example, got some of their royalties back because of that.
Wow.
So, but it was, at the time I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm fortunate to be meeting these people, because a lot of them won't be around that much longer.
No.
Etta James, for example.
Yeah.
And all these people were part of that record label.
Yeah.
Ike Turner. These guys years and years before they actually became well known. But I mean, all that to say, I really understand that whole idea of, you want to get these people.
You have to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I tell people at screenings, over the years, especially if they're younger, crowd, which isn't often, but I would say, you have an iPhone, go interview your parents and your grandparents. You don't have to be a documentary maker. You don't even have to make a documentary, but just find out. Yeah. Just ask questions. You won't know until you have it. Oh, that's pretty cool. And you won't know until 30 years later that you're really interested in it.
Yeah.
It's hard to, it's like preaching, to your kids.
Right. Someday you'll regret this.
You should really learn how to balance your checkbook.
Yep.
Or, learn how to use a credit card, and then you go bankrupt. But it really makes a difference.
It does. And that's, I think that's why I think for me, when I saw that movie, one of the things that I really was impressed by was the way you handled documenting not just these people's input in a one-on-one interview like this, but really just having them hang out and just shoot the breeze with each other, because that was so genuine.
I appreciate that. I don't think I know any differently, so that's probably,
well, that's how you
my
knew them.
ignorance is helping me.
Yeah.
It's funny because sometimes I find, because I do other stuff, I do, do content for other networks and other things.
It's another thing I want to get into in a minute, yeah.
And when I'm interviewing real people, non-artists, whatever, it could be medical people or something that, they feel comfortable with me, probably because I'm one of them. Mm-hmm. And I find that more intriguing anyways, because they're not selling anything.
Yes.
Not that on these things they're selling, but
there's an ulterior motive.
There's, but when you're doing these other interviews, like for TV Land or for MTV, whatever our jobs are, junkets.
Yeah.
They're selling a movie, they're selling an album.
Exactly. They're promoting something.
Promoting something. Mm-hmm. And I have, they have no interest as much as I have no interest. Sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
it's their manager or their record label or whatever told them they have to do this. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I like just, like I said, real people is just as good. As they say, everybody's got a story. And that's the thing. Every one of us has a story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people, if you can express an interest in it from a peer-to-peer perspective. I used to do a lot of corporate videos I still do a lot of corporate videos for clients and whatnot. And, a lot of times I'll interview a guy who put a sound system into a church or a school or something like that, and being able to talk to them in such a way that you can relate to them and you can get that human side of them, I think that's the key, really.
No, I think that's the hardest thing with marketing. It's like we were talking about marketing. Everybody's marketing. No matter what you do, we're always marketing. We're marketing ourselves. We're marketing, how you speak to someone. And it's like watching kids. I'm very fortunate my 2 kids are good at speaking with others. That is a huge thing. If you can speak to someone, that you not be so shy. And a lot of it's just shyness. Where I have impatience for people is rudeness.
Yes.
I can't take it when people are rude to people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be rude to me. It could be rude to someone next to me or around me or someone I know.
Sometimes that's even better. What they say about if you go on a job interview and you go to lunch and you watch the way they treat the wait staff.
Oh, absolutely.
Stuff like that, And I've seen that in the studio too, where they treat.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, it is.
But those people, you know what? Those people are consistently the same.
Yes.
That doesn't change. It's not like I'm having a bad day. Maybe, but not really. You could see with the differences.
Yes, it is, and it's it's an attitude.
Yeah.
And to me, I've always felt like just we can be kind to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't take any more energy than it does to be a dick.
No. That's where I if I had a kryptonite or something that that breaks me, is when people do that. And I can't, sometimes I'm not clever enough to bury someone well enough. Do you know what I mean?
Damn, I should have said,
it's always after the fact.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of going 0 to 60.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it just drives me nuts.
I mean, to me, I think communication is such a valuable thing. And it is really, in certain ways, it's a lost art. There's a lot of people who don't know how. Yeah, it is. It is. And it's so funny because the irony of that is that we're more connected than ever, but we're more isolated than ever.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, it's because we really, I think, having those, and you can call them what you want. I mean, people call it social skills, whatever, but I think the idea of just being able to communicate clearly and fairly with people, and not have, no drama, I mean.
I'd rather be with a crew member that is kind, fun. If you had, instead of a 10, the guy's at 10 or the girl's at 10, talent-wise, but they're jerks.
Yeah.
I'll go with the 8.
Yeah. Well, because you can teach. It's the same thing that, they tell you in the studio. I mean, I can teach you how to run a compressor, but I can't teach you how to talk to people, when to keep your mouth shut, all of that stuff. And I think that's far more valuable, because skills can be learned.
Yeah.
But human skills, that's a whole lot more important, I think.
Yeah.
Immediate family.
Right.
I want to know how that came about.
All right, so
did you decide to do that, or was it something that came to you?
No, someone actually, these producers, Greg Richling, John Sheldon, and Jack Pyatt, they came to me with another project with Dave Mason. They wanted to do a thing with Dave Mason, and
Traffic?
Yeah. I said, great, I'd love to. But Dave wanted his own friend to do it. I said, that's fine. And they were kind of bummed. I was like, well, no, I'm used to not getting jobs, so it's not that big of a deal. And they said, but would you still want to work on something else? I said, yeah. And they said, well, what about this? And it was Lisa Roy, who was the publicist.
Sure.
You know Lisa?
I knew Lisa well. Yeah.
And she was a fabulous lady. She had the idea. She said to Greg, why don't you do it on these guys.
She was Danny's partner at that
Right.
point, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Danny Kochmar, it was a story of Danny they have a band, Danny Kochmar, Russ Kunkel, Leland Sklar, Waddy Wachtel, and Steve Estelle. They have this band called Immediate Family.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew Leland briefly, socially on and off, but the other guys were all the legends, Waddy and Danny and Russ. And so I went, oh, this makes sense. I understand that. And why I jumped on it, obviously, is a great story, but the link to Wrecking Crew was perfect.
Sure.
Because now it's right after Wrecking Crew ends their career in the rock and roll era, in the records. I remember asking Lou Adler in the first one, did you change your sound when you did Tapestry? Do you stop using Hound, Dad, and all those guys because you wanted to change, direction? He said, no, absolutely not. He goes, Carole King brought her own people, and she brought her friends. She brought in Danny Kochmar and James Taylor to the studio. So that's where that went. And the other thing was, in the beginning of the Wrecking Crew, I did a voiceover saying, this is the story of my father and his extended family, the Wrecking Crew. So there was like the family thing, Immediate Family. There was the whole idea, this is the perfect jump off. Yeah, they're making a change in the studios, but it's a natural change.
And you had some generational sort of bridges there, like
Totally.
Leon, for example.
Totally.
Who really was
Leon
sort
Russell?
of Leon Russell was
Yeah.
of both generations in that sense.
Yeah, and Leon Russell, yeah, very much so. I mean, Leon was, even though he was a kid, he was very much, because don't forget, 1960, Dad's 30.
Yeah.
So he's not like a kid in the studios. He's already been around for a long time.
Sure.
But the rock and roll's taken in. Hal Blaine's 31.
Exactly.
Bill Pittman is 40.
All these guys are kind of making a pivot from jazz to rock. Yeah.
And a lot of it is because they could. Where the old rockers didn't want to do it, which comes from the Wrecking Crew name.
Yeah.
But Leon is probably what, his 20s.
Yeah.
So he hasn't, his longevity into the records is going to stay longer. And also, Leon had a different sound. Leon was an artist.
Yeah, and you also had the Jan and Dean connection.
Yeah.
Now I worked with Jan Berry for a few years in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
And so I heard a lot of those stories. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, I don't know are you aware of the whole Monkees story?
Which part?
That Jan and Dean were actually signed to do a series.
Well, that's part of the footage that's in my film.
Oh, is it? Okay.
That's the one. That's the. Oh God, what's the name?
I don't know if we're talking about the same thing here.
Where it's basically Jan is in a wheelchair in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and Hal was in it.
Right, but there had been that they had done one pilot episode and stuff like that. Yeah.
And it just never went anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's where that footage is from. When you see Jan and Dean in a big band, that's where that's from.
But then the whole reason the Monkees came about was because they already wanted to create this series, and
I didn't know
Jan had his accident at that point.
Right, exactly.
And was no longer able to, because Jan had been one of the first guys to really produce himself. He and Brian Wilson, were really
very much so. And Jan was in control, like Dino's. Jan had more control. He understood the music.
Yeah, and he had that same sense that Brian Wilson had of sort of hearing it all in his head.
Yeah.
And when he had his untimely accident, at least, and this is according to Jan, basically, that's when I guess Boyce and Hart and whoever else were, I don't remember who was the production team behind it, but they basically cast for the Monkees because that was their pivot into doing a series.
So that jumped off of that into
the Monkees. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And so in a certain sense, the Monkees came about because of Jan Berry's accident.
Wow.
Oddly enough.
Oh, it's funny because we always thought, you always think, they're jumping off the because of the Beatles.
Because of the Beatles, yeah.
Which is a little of it.
Well, that definitely is there is an aspect of that. But I didn't realize that Jan and that failed pilot. Yeah.
Wow.
Because the pilot would have gone. I mean, and if you look at that pilot and you compare it to the Monkees episodes, very similar. It's very like similar. A little bit of clowning around a song, and a little bit more clowning around another song. Yeah. It's the formula.
Yeah, you're right.
It's interesting.
Wow,
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know, that's the story of Glenn says in The Wrecking Crew about my father playing music upside down. You know, there were two things to that story. He goes, well, first of all, my father learned how to play music upside down because in the 50s when he was learning, when he came out here and he had no, you know, he'd practice 8-10 hours a day, he'd flip the music upside down so he didn't memorize a piece. And that's that's why he did that.
Really?
Yeah, that's how he learned.
Damn.
You know, it wasn't like magic. He, you know, he was a great reader, so he could do it.
Yeah.
And so what the story was, Dad was standing up to, he stood up to go get the music because it was upside down. He wanted to flip it back over. And Jan was all pissy. He went, Tommy, sit down. So if you know my father, okay, you told me what to do, I'll sit down. That was, and as soon as they just started playing and he starts playing that music and it's like, what the hell is he playing? It's nothing, you know, just what's there. What are you playing, Tommy? It's there, what you told me. And he comes around and it's upside down. So but it's so funny because, I mean, yeah, you're right. And Jan's the one that supposedly turned Brian onto the guys.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That was the other thing.
Yeah.
Because Brian saw them working with Jan when he did the one Brian song.
I have heard that too.
You know?
Yeah. Which makes sense because then you've got that whole lineage there, you know, Hal and all those guys. Yeah. It does make sense. Well, since we're still on Wrecking Crew, can we carefully wade into the Carol Kay thing?
Yeah.
Because, you know, at one point she obviously was a very big part of that movie and really
very much.
participated
She's a hero
into
in
it.
the film. Mm-hmm. All right, so the problem everything was great. Mm-hmm. Everything was great. Round table discussion, all fine. But I also wanted to make sure I got her story and his story and everybody's story. So I don't realize there's tension between Hal and her at this point, 98, 99, 2000. Literally lived 2 doors down from each other in a retirement
in Palm
community. No, that's the other part. In San Clarita or Newhall or something.
Okay.
So they're just going at it. 2 old people just literally going at it. And they stop
nobody knows
talking.
why.
No.
Okay.
No patience with each other.
Okay.
And they just keep going. And I was like a kid with divorced parents at this point because I was trying to get this film made. Dad dies in 97, 98, 99. I got nothing going. I just keep going, spending more money. And all I keep thinking is like, and they're fighting. I mean, literally in internet interviews and stuff. And I literally would, you know, she'd say something about Hal or leave him, don't worry about him. He's just an old man. Oh, don't worry about her. She's just an old lady. And I would just keep literally like divorced parents. And they were, you know, she was fine all the way through. And then he goes to Palm Springs or Palm Desert. She moves to Palm Springs. I was like, oh my God, they're still within hitting each other or running into each other. And this went on for years. And then it was time to the film, you know, I showed her the film and she says, great. And, you know, she had her comments, you know, some of them were not so nice about Hal and, you know, and I ignored it. And she goes, my only problem is with the name. And I said, Carol, I understand that. And I said, but it's a name that's kind of, and we say it at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
The Wrecking Crew. Some people remember it, some people don't. Some people say it's 15 people, some people say it's 12, 20 people. And I say it in the voice, I say, it's not about the name, it's about the time and a place in history.
Yeah.
So you could be part of the Wrecking Crew and you could have done 5 dates, maybe. You know, who knows? You weren't, you know what I mean? It wasn't, it's a time and a place.
Right.
And when Hal said, this is, the older guy said they're going to wreck the business playing this rock and roll shit. And it's a good line.
Yeah.
But my father never remembered it. Carol never remembered the name. You know, they might have called themselves the Crew. They might have said, get me the Crew or whatever, but nothing ever came of it. It came out of, I think, when Hal put the book together. So Hal, and we find, so the time comes where the film's done. She gives me great, fabulous praise, lovely emails, great quote, da 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 da. And I do, so now we have it in LA, and we're playing it downtown, the Films That Matter. And the Films That Matter was going to be outside, like 1,500 people.
What year was
the
this?
Summer, '08.
Okay.
So we haven't played in LA. We've done
Okay.
festivals. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time now that everybody could be around. So I go, marketing-wise, this is my favorite part about the film. At this point, I know the film's okay, but I'm enjoying marketing it. And I go to K-Earth, a big oldie station. I say, can we give tickets away all this week? Every day we'll give tickets away. We'll interview the people, and great. And then I went to Hands and Cement at Guitar Center.
Yep.
And they said, who do you want? And I said I want Hal and Don Randy on piano and Carol on bass and Glenn on guitar. Great. And because you could only pick 4.
Okay.
Hands and Cement, and the plaque we'll show you later. That's got all the names. Great. Perfect.
Yeah.
And so everything's moving forward. And I do one thing which I not regret, but I don't think it would have changed anything. I have a screening earlier in the week at the Union Hall. As my brother said, he goes, it's the first time I ever saw everybody smiling at a Union Hall. Everybody's like, nobody's bitching.
Yeah.
And Hal came in with Don Randy, and she went to go say hello to him, and don't forget they hadn't talked and physically talked in 8 years. And she said, hi, Hal. And he goes, get the fuck away from me.
Ooh.
So
Oops.
it went. And, he basically, he was kind of waiting for her probably. He was bitter, pissed off with her all these years. And I understand, but it wasn't the right thing to do, obviously.
Yeah.
And so the war was back on. And the next day she sent me an email saying, I cannot support the film. I cannot support that. I said, Carol, don't do that. I said, he wins then. You're not in this, please come to Hands and Cement. Be there. And it was nothing worse than having that picture of 3 white guys.
Yeah.
Hands and Cement. How cool would it have been to have her in Hands in the Cement, the one woman bass player who's very influential.
Not just that, but, she's not going to disavow what she's done because she has accomplished so much, and yet at the same time she's distancing herself from her own words, which is kind of a shame. There's something deeper there, obviously, and a lot of deep, bitterness or whatever's going on. I just feel bad because, she, she got in trouble for taking credits, for Jameson and all that stuff and all that. But as I said, my father was around. I remember him saying, Carol never has to take a credit for anything. He said she was not in the fringes. Carol was right in the middle. Absolutely.
She was number 1 call, if not, whatever. Not just bass, but guitar. She was always there in the guitar section. When they had 4 or 5 guitars, she was one of them.
And so much respect for being able to be one of the guys in that era.
How they treated her, they treated everybody like that.
Exactly.
And that's the unfortunate thing, but that's part of what was going on in life. We all grew.
Yeah,
as
and
people.
If you think back to like the sitcoms of that era, you had certain women who could hold their own with the guys. Yeah. And she had to have been one of those.
Oh, absolutely. She as a musician, she's a bass player. She's not someone's girlfriend that's playing tambourine or hidden in the percussion section.
Oh, no.
She totally, she's driving the band.
And, the thing about a bass player, I am a bass player. Yeah. And the one thing I know is nobody notices you unless you hit a wrong note.
Right.
Or stop playing when you shouldn't,
Yeah.
It's just such a, it's a very visible instrument without being visible at all.
Yeah.
And for her to hold down, the stuff she played is absolutely golden.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and that'll never be taken away.
Exactly. So I kind of feel bad for her.
Yeah, I do. And I do, and she says, she said something about the film's all lies. I said, well, Carol,
wow,
if this was all lies, and she said that on her website, it still might be there.
Yeah.
And I emailed her, I said, Carol, I said, "That's how do you say that? Because here's all your emails. Here's your quote. Is this Carol telling me the line, or is this Carol's line?"
Well, she's on camera saying these things too.
Yeah.
Yes, and you know, she's wonderful on camera too.
Yeah.
You know,
I just feel bad. You know, whatever.
Yeah. But aside from that, the legitimacy of the film has not been challenged, and it is a wonderful, wonderful.
Here's the thing. There's things that they said they did that maybe, like, you know, my father thought he was on Boots. He wasn't. Hal says he was on Boots, and supposedly he wasn't on the single.
Sure, and I mean, if you're doing that many tracks, and especially a lot of the times you're doing the track and you don't even know what it's going to be
No,
yet.
they had no vocal.
Yeah,
my
exactly.
dad, when he got a nice charm bracelet, or a little charm for a bracelet from Jimmy Webb for Up, Up and Away, when I won the Grammy. He said, "What's this for?" He goes, "It's for when we did Up, Up and Away with the Fifth Dimension the year ago." Father had no idea. Because, no, you got to realize, my father's doing 3 songs that day, whatever it was.
Right.
Knocking it out. There's no vocal.
Oh, this was that one that went, right?
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
It's the first time you've played it. You played it maybe a few hours, but you went to another piece of music, and then you went to another session, 3 sessions that day.
3 or 4 weeks later, it's out of your mind.
Yeah, tomorrow's out.
Let alone.
Yeah,
you know,
so he's not listening to radio. So if you listen to radio, it's so funny, because if you listen to the song and you hear the song, you go, "Oh yeah, that's me," because that was his Latin thing.
Oh yeah.
And he that he could tell what he was doing. That's his own little thing.
Yeah.
No one was doing that. But a Telecaster, you couldn't tell who was.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
You know, it could be 10 different people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, that time period. So I was bummed about that. You know, that. Listen, everybody's seen it. Not everybody, can't say that. That's wrong. But people have seen it. It has longevity. They still are touched by it. Those songs, and it's not because it's my film. I've watched it, and I've watched it in audiences. These films touch people because it's a bookmark in someone's life, the song. But you could have a jukebox documentary, or whatever you want to call it, where you just play songs and, you know, and tell stories, whatever. But you got to have a little more depth to it. You got to know where, you know, why I like the Wrecking Crew. Well, I like them both, but why it helped me understanding was, I was coming from a son's point of view the first time. I understood where, when I made it, when my dad was 61, he was playing his ass off. And that's when smooth jazz was coming out, the wave here. And it would drive me nuts, because, like, oh my God, please, someone take him and put him in an album, produce him.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he ate that shit up. If there was focus, he didn't care. But he's not also, at this point, he's working here and there. He's doing some live gigs, and he's doing big movies, but once every couple months. Godfather, Schindler's List, or whatever it is, but only when he's needed. He's being called when they want Tommy. Right. Which is really important in someone's psyche. But he didn't get bothered that he wasn't working that much. I don't think he did. He always said, it's the time. But for me as a son, I wanted to show that there is creativity at 60. Now I'm 63, or 60. What I mean? It's weird.
Yeah.
But there is creativity the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
In
fact, if anything, I think we get more creative as we get older. You know? Theoretically, 60s and 70s are supposed to be the most creative decades.
If you remember.
Yeah.
Remember what you're doing.
But, that's why it's good to do video. Yes. Because then you can go back.
But that was why I did these films.
Yeah.
And, same thing with, it's about the people are relating to, like in the first film, they're relating to the person passing away. They're relating to their end of their careers, or soon to end their careers, or losing their parent, or losing a wife or husband. And I think that's what you have to relate to it. You have to have someone be able to relate to these films.
Yeah, just milestones in that sense. Yeah. But with the immediate family now, that's kind of your era, my era.
It is my era, but in a weird way, because I understood more. I knew more of the stuff, But that came once Lisa Roy mentioned it, and we said yes, and then the band said yes. The next day they said Carole King can be interviewed in 3 weeks, and I panicked because I wasn't ready. I bullshitted my way through that one. Not really, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. But sometimes that's the best.
Yeah, so in 3 weeks I had to get Carole in the can, and then it was like everybody's moving fast. I had Carole, Jackson, James, Linda Ronstadt, Phil Collins, Lou Adler, and more. And then by January, we had like 10 people interviewed from August.
Yeah, that was pretty rapid fire, huh?
Right, and I didn't have the band, and then COVID hit. And that stopped us in our tracks for a good almost a year. But during that year, I started going out getting the guys, because if I didn't have the guys, I don't have a film.
Right. Right.
And you can be it sounds awful, but it's the truth. I got to get this stuff in the can.
Yeah.
Everybody's in their 70s. We don't know what's happening.
It's true. It's true. And I mean, these are guys who really, in certain ways, they were the soundtrack to our lives. And yet, it's so much, there's so much of just raw humanity there, and it's really, it's great to see that.
I think one of the greatest things where all these people have made it to the way they got there, whatever like my father said to these seminars and those kids at MI and stuff, he said, you don't get lucky playing music, you get lucky playing golf. Meaning like you can't just get up there and start playing the instrument and rip through it. It takes years in your craft. It's a craft you learn and when you see these guys and women at the professional level that they got to, and they're 1%, I mean literally maybe 0.5% sometimes of what the amount of people play instruments to be at a certain level.
Yeah.
And they will tell you, I bet you all of them will say, I was at the right place at the right time. And because I know my father said, if he came later, the guitar players of that day, like in the kids that he saw later, he goes, these kids are monsters.
Sure. And now same thing.
Changed.
Yeah.
There's no business for that.
No.
So that's what I mean is being at the right place at the right time, but
also being prepared.
Being prepared.
What's that old saying about luck favors the prepared?
Yeah.
I mean, he put his time in, he got his chops down,
and you can't hide. I mean, if you get to play your instrument at home, that's great. You can be the greatest, guitarist or whatever, but...
A tree falls in the forest.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing with us. I mean, I could sit there, I could have waited to try to keep doing the Wrecking Crew, and people thought it was nuts. Oh, what are you doing, Wrecking Crew? Has it been like 15 years? Yeah, but I'm just I'm getting closer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's gotta, that's probably, it was probably really a pleasure to be able to do Immediate Family that quickly, even with COVID notwithstanding.
Absolutely. I felt like there was a beginning, a middle, and an end that I saw.
Yeah.
And the thing is, here's the problem, not the problem, but you don't succeed. You could have a lot of awards. We got 18 awards for this one. Doesn't mean anything unless you sell it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what it comes down to. It's still a business. I still have to sell that project.
Yes.
I still have to make sure that people rent it, make sure that people will buy it, make sure that it keeps going, because I have to get our investors paid off.
Sure, exactly.
That's what it comes down to.
Well, and that's why, I mean, you also, and here's a nice segue here. Yeah. You also do a lot of other projects on the side. I know you've done some things for Comedy Central.
Right.
There's the Dr. Z thing, which...
Hanging with Dr. Z.
Yeah, it's a...
And that came out of so Hanging with Dr. Z is Dana Gould.
Right.
And I met Dana Gould, the comedian. I was producing a show called Pulp Comics in the late 90s, early 2000s. And what it was stand-ups would do their stand-up, and then we'd break into pieces that related to whatever their stand-up. So we would film the narrative. And so Dana I met years ago and became friends with him and produced some other stuff for him. And during COVID, he always has this fascination with Dr. Zayas.
Right.
Well, we call him Dr. Z because he's Dr. Z. He's not Dr. Zayas. Disney, just in case. But he was a science fiction nut.
Uh-huh.
And so we said, what about, and I saw him do this at a symposium of Planet of the Apes at USC, where they had a panel of Planet of the Apes, producers or crew, whatever it was from years before,
Right.
And it was a fabulous interview. And they said, well, we have one more guest, Dr. Zayas, or Dr. Z, whatever. And he comes out, and these people have no idea who this guy is. Because they're makeup person or this person, that person.
Yeah.
And Dana comes out in full, makeup and sits down and just riffs. And basically he plays a character. This guy is, I call it, it's a talk show that we do.
Right.
And he interviews all these other comedians. And I call it, it's like Merv Griffin meets Fernwood Tonight.
It's very much a Fernwood Tonight kind of vibe
It's just
to it too.
all
Like,
improv.
yeah, almost
Everything-
like late night cable or something.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's wickedly funny sometimes. And it's like, and I sit there and after we shoot stuff or look at stuff, dailies or stuff, and I go, wow, where'd that come from? Because they're playing off each other. There's nothing, there's no segues, there's nothing. Dana hears something, he goes off, and then the other person, Rusty Steele, his MD, pretend MD. And it's like watching jazz, but I'm watching Coltrane, I'm watching Parker.
Yeah, it's out there.
And
definitely.
it's like,
yeah.
and you go, wow, these guys are the best at what they do.
They are. They go down a rabbit hole, and yet they find their way out of it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it's so much fun to do, and they're really nice people. That's the greatest thing. So Dana, we've interviewed, Jason Alexander was just released this week.
I saw that one. Yeah, I saw the one with Lorraine Newman too.
Yeah,
that
Lorraine,
was fabulous.
and then Kevin Pollak, and just we did Will Forte, Bobcat, Coldthwaite, and on and on. We've done about 20 of them, 30 of them now, but there's so much, and we're just trying to take it on the road now.
Yeah, it's what I
And
like
there's no
about
money to be made, by the way.
Of course, yeah.
But that's the one thing is like I enjoy more than anything. I will do anything for this show because I really enjoy, and it's fun.
It is, and it's got as you say, it's got this really kind of spontaneous improv vibe to it, but it's deep.
Yeah.
It's like he'll get into these really kind of deeply serious jokes. And you're like,
oh yeah.
Whoa, did you just say that?
Oh yeah, and it goes, oh my God, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing now. So season 3's up, but we're trying to take it on the road now. So what I'm trying to do is find sponsorship for the show so we could actually take it on the road. This is expensive.
Yeah.
It's makeup is not putting on a mask. It's like 3-hour process. So you got that, and you got it's a lot.
Yeah, and then of course even with video being a whole lot cheaper to shoot and everything, you still got to have a set,
cheap part.
people, and everything.
That's
yeah,
the cheap
exactly.
part.
Yeah, that's the easy part. You know.
I mean, and so one of my favorites is when you put them in, I don't know if you've seen these, but when you put them in the makeup, it takes 3 hours. We're doing a promo or something. And I said, why don't we put them in the car, like comedians in cars. I said, let's put some iPhones, let him and Rusty Steele, who's Paul Greenberg, he's a friend of ours. He's another one off the charts.
I love the way he's playing the toy guitar and everything.
Yeah. And it's just so, he's Canadian. Not that it matters. Nothing against Canadians. But he and his wife are Jackie Harris are so funny. And again, you let them go. But I put these cameras in the car, let them drive around, and I don't know until they come back. And the first time we did it, it was hot. It was in August, so you can imagine him and makeup and in the Ultima, it was a horrible car, and come back, no one looks at it. I don't look at it for a few months, and I thought, let's look at it for the promos for the next season, and I start picking it apart, and I went, oh my God.
Just little gems here and there.
Oh, because if you break it, because it's going on for an hour.
Yeah.
But they're going on for an hour about everything. So the first, you get 3 minutes here, 2 minutes here, a minute here, and it's like, did he really say that? Did he come back and say that? Where'd that go?
Yeah.
So that's been my favorite parts is when you put those two together and just let them riff.
Oh, I love that, man.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of these kind of just labor of love things just to stay busy, huh?
You're hoping that it's more than a
Well, of course, yeah.
At some point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But you dive into stuff not necessarily knowing whether it's gonna.
No.
Yeah.
Because you got to take a chance.
Yeah.
I can't say if what's it pay all the time when I know it's not paying. I'm doing the budget, so I already know it's not paying. So I pay everybody else.
I've done well over 100 episodes of this show,
but
and it's just because I love what I'm doing. It's not because I expect to make money out of it.
And hopefully, and my father taught me that one thing he tells everybody. He says the 4 things that you want a job to give you: money, experience, meeting people, or just for fun. If it doesn't have any of those 4, forget it.
Yeah, and hopefully they intertwined it.
Yeah. If it's
points,
all 4, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, you go exactly. Well, that's the charmed life, right?
Yeah. No, but it's like now we're still in our 60s. I'm 63, and I'm thinking, okay, we do have to reinvent ourselves now.
Yes.
It's not, I've never had a real job.
Same here.
And it's scary in a weird way but at the same time, it'd be scary if I got a real job.
I don't think I could handle a real job.
I don't know what that would mean.
Yeah. You mean like sitting in a cubicle somewhere or something?
I don't know what the job would be.
Yeah. That's just it.
Going to work every day, and I'm not, believe me, being a freelancer for the last 40 years has not been so much joy.
It's it's a lot more work in many senses, because you're constantly working.
Yeah, the best vacation is always when you're on a vacation knowing you got a big job coming back to.
Yes.
Never had a great vacation, once. Yeah. I remember that. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And it's mental. It's, if you can keep the mental straight.
Well, and a lot of times you have to just tell yourself, I'm doing this because sooner or later it'll, the universe will pay me back some other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you do have to have that belief.
Like I said, I've done almost 140 episodes of this, and it's the same thing. It's like, what I have gotten out of it is a lot of great relationships and, learned a lot from everybody I talked to, and that's a joyous thing right there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, so that's where I'm at now. It's just constantly looking. I have another one that I'm doing now, which we started, is on Wolfman Jack.
Oh.
And that's my next doc.
Really?
We're hoping.
Wow.
Hopefully by the time that you finish this, the financing will be in. But I've already interviewed Richard Dreyfuss, Johnny Rivers, and a few other people.
Wow.
And it's fabulous. Because I didn't realize, listen, we're of a certain age. We know who he is.
Yeah.
If you're 40 and under, 35 and under, forget it.
No idea.
No one
Sure.
knows.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because it was part of our lives when we were growing up as teenagers and before.
You knew exactly who he was.
Yeah. And so I'm just loving learning more about him. The real Bob Smith. So.
Wow.
And I'm happy about that. So hopefully that'll be out. Excuse me. Hopefully that'll be out within a year and a half. So, but start other ones as well. We'll see.
Cool. Well, so let me wrap with a question that you may or may not be able to field. Being, sort of self-motivated on the spectrum, all of those things, which we both are.
Let's talk about self-motivation. Could be the least of the one. Yes.
Well,
because self-motivation would mean I could play guitar.
Well, okay, but no, self-motivation in terms of...
it's a struggle.
It is. Right, it is. I understand, but self-motivated because it's the only way you know.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and that's where I'm at too. It's like, so being that type of person.
Right.
If you were talking to 15-year-old you now, in this day and age, where we have so many more possibilities, but so many more liabilities, what would your advice to yourself be?
I know what I would say to myself. It's hard because you kind of know where you went. Don't be afraid of things. Don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid of the technology. Like I said, the ADHD, I didn't realize until my kid was diagnosed that I was that.
Yep.
And
Same
I would
here.
look back when I was 10, 11, I survived school. I survived college, got all the way through. But looking at models, when you're a kid, you're making a model. I could not read those directions and put it together. I can read, but I couldn't. And now, that would have been a hell of a, what do you call it? Like, I don't know. I mean, my parents don't know that. I'm just placing things
I
together.
used to just put them together without looking at the instructions.
Right, because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I didn't know why. I wasn't like that, which is what, like my younger brother is a sound engineer and mixer. He understands all that technology. He can get through all that. I didn't understand it. And it's like if I'm looking for help on a YouTube channel, like, I can't figure this out. How do you do that in Premiere again?
Yeah.
And it doesn't match up to my screen. I'm lost.
Yep.
And so, but I would say don't be afraid of technology and just go for it. Just do whatever, don't, I would just go for it. And just, but at the same time, try everything, but don't take everything. Meaning like, not take everything, but find a focus. I wish I would have gone more into production instead of lighting in at that time. Who knows? I mean, things would not have been the same.
Right,
I might not
exactly.
have done the wrecking crew. I might not have done this. Might not have tried.
And it might not have looked the same.
Yeah.
I mean, all the experience that you gained in lighting and doing the IMAX stuff, all of that stuff, it had to have played in somehow. Everything
you're right.
builds on each other.
Yeah.
So,
I think the biggest thing in terms of lighting that gave me help was being in videos.
Sure.
Rock and roll videos.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was all about lighting and look, and I think that helped. But I would say not be afraid, because I was afraid.
Really?
Still, yeah.
Do you think it held you back?
Oh, very much so. Afraid of the technology, yes. But again, I could not learn. I didn't know how to learn. I think knowing how to learn is a huge asset. So for like things like subjects like history, not a problem. Because I could write out those cards.
Sure.
Who's the president?
But that's learning for the test, as opposed to critical thinking.
Yeah. But it got me there, and it got me interested. And it's funny because history would have taken a minor in history. I love that. And I still learn. I love watching things. I love, history is my favorite subject.
You essentially are a historian.
I guess, yeah. Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best. I don't know if that made any sense.
Well, it made a little bit of sense. What the hell?
Hopefully that 15-year-old kid won't fail totally.
Denny Tedesco, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Bo.
It's been a pleasure.
It.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.